Sentinel Returns is a game almost nobody remembers. I mean, heck, even I forgot it existed until not too long ago. It was developed by Hookstone and released for both PC and PlayStation in 1998 as a sequel to The Sentinel. Visually, both games look almost completely different. While The Sentinel used a bright color palette, Sentinel Returns contrasts with a dark and surreal art style. The world of Sentinel Returns is a strange one, comprised of hills, checkerboard surfaces, floating trees and blocks which pulsate, almost as if it were alive. It's a creepy, alien-looking place, and its atmosphere is only enhanced by the soundtrack. Can you guess who composed the soundtrack? That's a rhetorical question. It's John Carpenter. I'm not even kidding. Now, I'm not that familiar with the man's work, but his Wikipedia page says he's often credited in horror movies, and given the game's tone, it looks as though they made the right choice. Sentinel Returns is more or less identical to its predecessor. You control a robot called a Synthoid who must defeat the Sentinel that resides in the tallest point of the map. Naturally, you might be asking to yourself, well, what the heck is going on? What the heck is a Synthoid? What's a Sentinel? What's this weird alien thing in the main menu? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because I'm happy to tell you that while the game doesn't make sense at first, it does provide many answers as to what's going on. I'm just kidding, it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. And I don't even think the game knows what it's about either. The narrative isn't even elaborated in the manual. It's so vague that websites across the internet don't have any idea what's going on. So rather than waste time coming up with contrived theories to make sense of things, we'll just move on to the gameplay. As stated before, Sentinel Returns plays almost identically to The Sentinel. Movement is special in that controlling a character isn't achieved through rotating the analog stick or pressing arrow keys, but rather by placing down a robot and transferring into it. To defeat the Sentinel, you'll have to reach a place that is equal or taller than its height before you can absorb him. To get there, you've got some climbing to do. In every level you start out at the bottom of each world. Everything that is equal or less than your current height can be absorbed to gain energy, but everything above cannot, except for boulders. Boulders allow you to place down your robot on top regardless of height. Boulders and everything else in the game has an inherent energy value. Trees and minis have 1 unit of energy, boulders have 2, robots and sentries have 3, and the Sentinel has 4. The manual states that energy is the key to success, but it's only half right. Energy is also the key to survival, since it also acts as your health pool. You see, when you get spotted, you start to lose energy, and when you run out, well, I think you can guess the rest. As far as I know, there are only 3 enemy types in this game, 2 of which you'll be seeing a lot. Let's start with the Sentinels. They're pretty much the main antagonist of the game. Their origins are unknown, and what is known is that they are beings made from metal and flesh. I also assume that they're these things, whatever the hell that is. The Sentinel and every other enemy in the game cannot move, but it does slowly rotate 360 degrees on either a clockwise or anti-clockwise direction. You can tell when they're rotating when you hear this sound. The Sentinel alone is not much of a threat. Its slow speed and predictable behavior makes him easy to manage. This is where the sentries come in. Sentries are like security cameras. Its purpose is to fortify defenses. Mechanically, they're the same as the Sentinels, only that more than one can appear in any level and reside at varying altitudes. Also, they don't have an animation or sound when they rotate, so that's pretty inconvenient. Finally, we have the minis, and before you ask, yes, that's actually what they're called, at least according to the manual. Minis only appear when Sentinels or sentries can see you, but cannot fully scan you. When this happens, they attempt to summon minis to transport you to another location and steal several points of energy. So I've spent a lot of time explaining the mechanics to the point where you're probably wondering what are my thoughts on the gameplay. I think the gameplay is quite unique. It's a puzzle game where danger dynamically shifts, forcing you to be alert at all times. Since you cannot move freely, being spotted in levels with many enemies is often a frantic affair, often resulting in rushed escapes where you could accidentally transport to another enemy's line of sight, or hyperspacing. I haven't really explained hyperspacing, so I'll give a quick rundown. Hyperspacing serves two purposes. The most common is to finish a level after transporting to the Sentinel's podium, and its second function is to relocate to another area in the level. That's pretty much the gist of it anyways. All in all, Sentinel Returns can be addicting at times, but like all games it's got problems, so let's get into them. I haven't mentioned this before, but I've been playing on an emulator, which is the reason why the gameplay footage is at a higher resolution than normal. Even with the resolution bump, the direction in which enemies are facing can be hard to determine, and that's mostly down to two things: not having a visible line of sight for enemies and their design. Enemy design can be described as fairly symmetrical, which can make it hard to determine their direction at a distance. Usually you can tell when a sentinel is facing sideways, but when facing forward or backward it becomes a little unclear since the silhouette is more or less the same. Sentries on the other hand are completely symmetrical, with the only way to determine their direction is by a small dot. Another problem I've been having is the mouse movement on PlayStation. The cursor in this game is a little hard to describe. It's like it operates on a grid, making precise movements a challenge. And finally, the level design. Once you reach a point where sentries and sentinels become the norm, you start to realize that the game has nothing else to offer. It doesn't change the formula by adding more than one sentinel at a time, or a unique layout that forces you to adopt new strategies. Every level more or less plays out the same. Start from the bottom, observe enemy positions and directions, eliminate sentries, and eliminate the sentinel. There are 650 levels in the game, and to be fair you can skip them in increments of 4 depending on the amount of energy you finish with. But if you want to achieve the true ending, you'll have to endure all 650 levels, and I doubt the effort will be worth it. I've been spending a lot of time talking about the PlayStation version and not the PC version. Both versions are basically the same game, but they have a few differences. I think it's better if I show you. Before you ask, yes, there's no music. Why? I honestly have no clue. The audio patch included in the file from myabandonware.com doesn't make a difference. I can only guess the patch doesn't work due to some missing drivers that once existed in older Windows versions, but I'm not sure. It's a shame because the music is a big part of what made the atmosphere, and with it gone, it's just not the same. What's interesting about the PC version is how it has different sound and visual effects. While you'd expect the PC counterpart to have the best visuals, it's not the case here. While it does have a much better resolution, the art style has taken a hit with brighter environments and simpler skyboxes, which removes much of the eerie and creepy atmosphere. Mechanically, the game is at its best on PC with proper mouse precision and better frame rates. I don't know for sure, but it feels as though the Sentinel rotates faster. However, the PC version has one fatal flaw: it can't save. You can rebind controls and save your game, but it'll all reset every time you reboot the game. Perhaps I've installed the game wrong since I couldn't find anyone else having the same problem. Long story short, I couldn't find a fix, so I've just been playing on the PS1 version. I started this video saying that almost nobody remembers the game, and after playing it for a while, I think I know why. You see, Sentinel Returns is kind of like Sudoku. Both games are puzzlers that vary greatly in difficulty, but their unremarkable layouts lead to a repetitive experience to the point where levels start to blend together. I was happy to play 10 levels. I was fine playing 10 more, but I was feeling the burn after playing 50 or so levels. The Sentinel series may be mostly forgotten, but that doesn't mean it hasn't left its mark, with several remakes of the original and a spiritual successor called Annwn. I've only played the demo of Annwn, and for the most part it faithfully recreates the basic concept and gameplay loop of Sentinel Returns. The biggest differences are the cursor, which is always locked at the center, and placing and absorbing objects is a gradual process. If you are interested in just Sentinel Returns, I'd look for it in myabandonware.com, or you could find a ROM to boot it up in an emulator. Just be mindful of the issues I mentioned on PC. You can find original copies on eBay, but with a price of $30 redos, it's not worth it. Until then, I'll see you next time.